She received a bachelor's degree in agricultural chemistry from National Taiwan University in 1986, master in food science from University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities in 1989, and PhD in food science and technology from Iowa State University in 1992. She joined American-made Products company as a staff chemist in 1994 after conducting postdoctoral research at Iowa State University for 1 year and a half. She joined food science department at the University of Arkansas as a food carbohydrate chemist in 1998 and was promoted to full professor in 2009. Her research interests include characterization, modification, and application of starch and starch structure and properties as relate to rice quality. Thank you very much, Dr. Wang, for accept this invitation. It's an honor for us to participate in these seminars of the CEPROVI. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank Dr. Vero Perez for the invitation to give this talk on rice quality and utilization. So in this talk, I will cover two areas. One is rice quality, another one is rice utilization. So in terms of rice quality, I would talk about the market quality, the cooking and eating quality, the nutritional quality, the aging effect on rice quality, and the quality preference in different countries. For rice utilization, I will cover different type of rice for different application in terms of unprocessed raw rice or processed rice, also rice component, and rice in processed food. So when we talk about rice, you have to understand rice is the most important staple food. It provides about half of a world population as a staple food. If we look at here, you can see if we talk about production, 3 countries produce the most of rice in the world: China, India, and Indonesia, which cover almost 60% of rice production. In terms of rice consumption, also these 3 countries, China, India, and Indonesia, they cover about 59% of global rice consumption. So pretty much rice is produced where the rice consumption is, but there are also exceptions. For example, US is not the leading rice producing country, but it is one of the most important rice exporting countries. So this is where a lot of research going on, because the US rice produce really majority will be exported to other countries. So if we talk about rice production in Mexico, if you look at here, you will see these are the regions where, these two will be the most important rice producing region in Mexico. But overall, rice is not produced a lot for the domestic market in Mexico, and therefore Mexico import a lot of rice from different countries. So here you can see here, Mexico only produce about 300,000 metric tons, and it does consume more than that. So Mexico import a lot of rice from other countries. If you look at this chart, United States is the main rice exporter to the Mexican market, followed by Uruguay, Brazil. And here, this is Uruguay, Paraguay, and Brazil. So Mexico really export a lot of rice also from South America, but America is the predominant rice exporter in Mexican market. So let's talk about rice varieties in the world, how rice is classified. So rice is generally classified as 3 different varieties. One is Japonica. Here is shorter, rounder grain, lower amylose content, and usually grow in cooler region. And indica here is indica is long, slender, fat grain, and usually has much higher amylose content, and usually grow in tropic and subtropical regions. And there is Japonica, which is belong to the Japonica. It has long, broad, and thick, a little bit longer than the Japonica, and it has also a little bit lower amylose content than the indica. So because US really is the main rice exporter to the Mexican market, so I would like to give you some overview about where rice is grown in the US and the difference of the rice grown in different regions. So there are really 3 major rice producing regions. One is Mississippi Delta here. Another one is Gulf Coast here. And then it's California Valley here. So this is the most predominant rice growing region, followed by California, and then followed by the Gulf Coast. So Arkansas, where I am located, is the #1 growing region in long grain rice, which is the main type of rice consumed in Mexico, and it's #2 in medium grain rice. If we talk about California, California is the #1 in medium grain rice, where most of the rice is used in export really to Asian market, particularly Japanese market, and also used in a lot of further processing applications. So in terms of rice classification in the US, usually we classify rice in terms of the size, dimension of the kernel. So we talk about long grain. It's a slender kernel, which the length over width ratio is about at least 3. For meal rice is a little bit high amylose, intermediate to high amylose content. It's usually dry, fluffy, and separated when cooked, which is the type of rice usually consumed in Mexico. For medium grain rice, it's wider kernel. The length to width ratio is about 2 to 2.9 for meal rice. It's a little bit lower amylose content. It's a little bit stickier and moist when cooked. There is also a short grain, which is almost round kernel. The length to width ratio is equal or less than 1.9 for meal rice. It's sticky and it's really unique, mostly for sushi rice application. So what really affects rice quality, as you can probably imagine, genetic, different variety will have different characteristics, mostly affected by the protein, starch, and lipid composition and the content. In terms of environment, even the same variety, if you grow in different environment, they will have different properties. Usually it's affected by the soil type and crop management, such as fertilizer, the rain, the solar radiation, and the temperature. So all these 5 factors affect the quality of rice. In addition, post-harvest factors such as drying, milling also affect the quality of rice. So if we look at a rice grain, you can see rice endosperm is covered by bran layer and also by a layer of protection husk. So if we look at this, we call paddy rice or rough rice, it includes both the bran layer and the husk. If we remove the husk, we call brown rice. If we remove the bran layer, we call meal rice. So in terms of rice quality, when we talk about rice quality, if we only focus on market quality, then we talk about the milling quality, the appearance, the degree of milling, and the size and the shape. So the milling quality, what does that mean? It means when we mill rough rice or petty rice, we have to consider how much head rice we can recover after the milling process. So if we look at here, if we lose some part of the rice kernel, a portion, if it's more than 1/4, and if it's more than 1/4, then we consider those as broken. And the value of broken is almost only half of the value of the head rice. So the head rice, including the whole kernel, all the way up to 3/4 of the whole kernel. So these all consider head rice. And if it's smaller than 3/4, we consider brokens. And broken, the value of broken is much less than the head rice. So what caused the brokens? So if you look at the picture of here, you can see when we harvest the petty rice, even before we mill the rice, it's possible already some fissure occur inside the kernel, which could cause fissure when we just apply some shear to the rough rice. And it is usually caused by genetically or caused by the growing environment, or could be caused by the drying process. So how about appearance? So if you look at these two pictures, I think you'll agree appearance of on the left side look much better than on the right side. The reason is the left side, it looks more translucent. It does not have a lot of white spot we call chalky. We call chalkiness. So if you look at here, you can see a lot of white spot here. And overall, it appears a little bit more white, not as translucent as to the left one. So here will be considered as much better appearance than this rice. Any question you may have? If you have a question, please ask question anytime. If you have a question, yeah, you can ask question anytime. What is the question? Yeah, if you have a question, please just ask questions, so it'll be easier.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Dr. Wan, no question. Is the problem because some people has opened the microphone?
Okay.
Please close your microphone. Thank you. Sorry.
So if we talk about chalkiness, we look at previous one, you can see, the white spot here, there. We call chalkiness. So there are different forms of chalkiness. Could be the germ tip, could be the white back, could be the white belly, white core, or we call milky endosperm, the whole, most of the endosperm appear white. So the causes of a chalkiness usually we associate with a diverse environment, which such as some disease, some weather, temperature, which become not as favorable for the grain during the grain filling period, and some attribute to the genetic makeup. Some variety tend to have more chalky kernels than the others. So here, one of these main effects we can tell is during the starch biosynthesis, some interrupt the biosynthesis, so result in the formation of chalky kernels here. So, for example, here you can see in the US, usually they have a different grade of rice, and during different grading, they limit the amount of chalky kernels in each grade. So if you buy a higher grade of a rice, usually it has much lower percentage of chalky kernels. For example, certain require less than 5%. For example, here, this rice sample has less than 5% of chalky kernel. This sample has 5 to 10% chalky kernel. And if you look at this one, it has more than 10% chalky kernel. Usually it's not desirable. However, we're going to talk about one specific rice, usually that is desirable to have that appearance. Most of the time, chalkiness is not desirable because it distracts the overall appearance. And usually it results in low milling yield. And when you cook, the chalky kernel do not perform, just perform differently from the regular non-chalky kernel. So usually it will cause non-uniform cooking process. So really, what is inside of chalky kernel? What causes the chalky appearance? And people already demonstrate it's because of the, usually it's due to the starch packing. So if you look at here, when starch packed tightly, there will be no space between starch kernel. So when you look at here, it appears as translucent. However, when starch granule, they don't pack tightly, which means it has light. It will have a space in between rice starch granules, and you're going to have a space in between. And then you will have the light reflection, just like here. And that's why it looks chalky. So most of the time, the chalky kernel is really because of starch granules are not packed tightly. And this is usually formed during the non-favorable growth conditions, such as really high temperature during the grain filling period time. So here, another thing with the quality is the milling quality. What does that mean? Rice can be milled to different degree, depending on the application, depending on the specification. So what does that mean? How much bran you want to remove during the milling process? Because bran layer is a continuous process. It's not, like once you mill certain period of time, you remove the bran. So it's a continuous process. So here, for example, you mill 6% milling degree, and you remove 8%. As you increase the milling degree, the rice become whiter and whiter. So depending on your application, and also depending on your specification. So for example, for some application, usually they only mill to certain degree. But for example, for Japanese sake production, they will remove almost 50% of rice because they want to completely eliminate the lipid in their sake production, the Japanese wine production. So they want to make sure they can remove as much as possible. And so that's why when you consider your application, you can decide what would be the amount of bran layer you want to remove. And it doesn't mean you have to always remove to a very greater degree. It's all dependent on your application. So as we just mentioned the degree of milling, what happens when you remove more? So if you just look at the picture here, we have the husk and we have the bran layer, and this is endosperm. So if you look at this cross section and we dye with iodine, you can see here, the blue color is really because of starch. It will dye, it will interact with iodine and form blue color. So you can see the endosperm at the center, but you can see it's all the way to really the bran layer. So if you increase the degree of milling, which you keep milling to the center of the endosperm, you're going to have lower protein content, lower lipid content, lower mineral content, but increase the starch content. So here, as I mentioned, rice is classified into short, medium, and long grain in the US. And they are very, very specific, specific in terms of how these grains are defined in terms of length to width ratio. So you have to really meet the classification to be considered as long grain, medium grain, or short grain within their specific range. So next one, let's talk about cooking quality. The quality I just covered relate to the market quality. So how about cooking quality? So we want to talk about, how you're going to cook, cooking method, the grain elongation, volume expansion and water absorption, and solid in the cooking water, we call solubles. So in terms of eating quality, most of the time we can evaluate the rice eating quality based on sensory evaluation. Would be trained panelists or consumers. You can also based on instrument for texture analyzer or instrument or visco electrography, which measure the specific texture aspect of cooked rice. For very, very specific group, such as aromatic rice like jasmine and basmati, we can also determine the aroma based on sensory or based on instrument like GC to measure the amount of aromatic compounds. How about nutritional quality? Usually we talk about lysine, the protein content and lysine content. We also talk about protein quality. There are specific type of pigmented rice, which could provide some bioactive component and also heating effect, the heating effect on the nutritional quality. So lysine is the #1 limiting essential amino acid. So that is the limitation of rice in terms of the lysine content. Nevertheless, rice is a good source of cysteine and methionine amino acid. For protein quality, they are breeding effort, try to breed new variety to provide better protein quality. And here, pigmented rice, for example, purple rice, black rice, or red rice, they do contain really significant amount of phenolic compound, which could provide some benefit, although some phenolic compound could reduce protein solubility and digestibility. When you heat up rice by high temperature, some amino acid could be affected in terms of the digestibility. So let's talk about aging, storage change. Usually we don't consume all the rice produced in single year, so we have to store rice. When we store rice, aged rice usually become more stable, usually because of some protein cross-linking oxidation, which really increase starch stability and at the same time reduce soluble solid. However, some off-order and discoloration could happen. This could be through lipid oxidation, and this discoloration could be some browning reaction, Maillard reaction happen. It causes a little bit color change. Usually when you cook aged rice, usually it's a little bit harder, a little bit fluffier. It's not as sticky as freshly harvested rice. However, for people in the country where you consume long grain rice, you may like the aged rice better because it tends to be a bit harder and fluffier. It's not sticky, which sometimes may not be desirable, and which also uptake a little bit more water. So if you cook fresh freshly harvested rice, you probably want to use a little bit less water to cook. So here, just show you what happened when you cook rice that has been stored for a different period of time. So for example, here, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, all the way to 12 months. So if you look at here, this is one variety. So freshly harvested rice will have higher viscosity. And as you increase the storage time, the viscosity decrease. And the same thing with koshikari. This is shogun rice. You can see the same thing here. The fresh has higher. And as you store, the viscosity decrease. The same thing with water uptake. So the closed circle is storage at 4 degrees Celsius, and open circle means store at a higher temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. So here, water uptake increase. If you store at 37 degrees Celsius, the same thing with different variety. How about the solid content really decrease if you store at high temperature? So you have more, you can uptake more water, and also you produce less soluble solid. So how about rice texture? So you have a different rice variety stored at a low temperature and high temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. So hardness increase and adhesiveness decrease. So that is true for all the variety evaluated in this study. How about the quality preference in different countries? So you have to keep in mind different regions, different countries prefer different type of rice. So when you try to produce product for different country, different region, you have to understand their market and you have to understand their preference. So for example, in Europe, they tend to like low to intermediate amylose rice. And in the North America, they like the intermediate and high amylose rice. The same thing with South America. In Australia, tend to have intermediate. Africa tend to have high amylose. So here, how about Asia? Even within Asia, they like different type of rice. So it's not even universal. For example, China, in the northern part, they like really stickier rice, lower amylose content, and they like the southern part, they like the high amylose content and not sticky rice. So you can see in the whole world, every region is very, very specific. So when you try to produce rice for different market, or when you try to study how different rice impact different region, you have to first understand what type of rice they like and what would be their quality attribute they are looking for. So here, really, it tells you the amylose content in terms of low to intermediate here. And for example, India tend to be high. That is why we didn't have the other region here. So rice utilization, let's talk about rice utilization. Rice is not only used as a table rice. So you have to understand rice, besides using as a table rice, which is the main way to consume rice in many, many countries, rice is also used a lot in processed food. And so that's why you have to understand what type of rice should be used for what type of application. So you need to think about different grain type and unprocessed, process, and individual component, and in what type of processed food used in rice. So for rice grain type, we talk about long grain, medium grain, and short grain. We can also compare brown rice and meal rice. You can also talk about sticky rice, which is sweet rice or waxy rice, which has no amylose content, very, very low amylose content. Or you can talk about aromatic rice, or arboreal rice. So let's go over each rice type. So if we talk about unprocessed, which this is head rice, and you can have a second head rice, it's about 1/2, or brewer's rice, which is about 1/4 of the whole thing. So that's why you need to understand what does it mean head rice in the US is at least 3/4 of the length of the whole kernel. You can have a second head, you can have a brewer's rice. They are not head rice, but they still have a different length of the size. So brewer rice usually is much, much smaller. And usually used a lot in beer, in fermented product, in pet food. So if you talk about processed rice, there are different ways to process rice. The first is parboiled rice, quick cooking rice, individually quick frozen rice, puffed crispy rice, flour, or syrup. So parboiled rice is consumed a lot in the world, particularly in India, Pakistan, and Africa. So what is parboiled rice? Parboiled rice is partially cooked rice. So rice is soaked, steamed, and dry. So during the soaking process, rice is fully hydrated, and some pigment nutrient migrate into the endosperm. During the steam process, starch is gelatinized, and then the whole rice kernel is dry. So this is what happened during the soaking process. The modern soaking process is high temperature soaking for 3 to 4 hours. So this is what happened when you soak at a different temperature. Usually we want to soak at 60 to 70. You don't want to soak at a really high, because if you soak really high temperature, starch start uptake water and burst and destroy the whole kernel. So here, this is what happened. Usually we soak at around 60 to 65 degrees Celsius. Depending on the type of rice. And then we try to avoid really high temperature, because if you soak at really high temperature, you are going to really overcook at that point, and then you cannot hold the whole shape. So the kernel is distorted, and you are going to have all the broken rice when you mill the rice. But if you soak too long, this is what happened. And it's going to, cause the darkening of the kernel, and which is not desirable. So usually we soak around 3 hours. That's usually what industrial process also part of industrial process soaking condition too. And if you don't fully soak, if you soak temperature, the duration too short, you're going to see the rice is not fully hydrated. So you're going to see the core is not cooked, because starch is not hydrated. Starch cannot be gelatinized. So you see still the uncooked part at the center. So during the steaming process, usually we steam at 100 to 120 degrees Celsius under pressure. We try to fully gelatinize starch. And then we dry to 12 to 14 degree percent for safe storage. Some country they use sun dry, and most of in the US is hot air. And starch is retrograded during that drying process. So parboiling really increase the milling yield and decrease the fissure, because it decrease the fissure, also decrease the chalkiness, and therefore increase the milling yield. also increase the hair rice yield. But at the same time, it changed the color to a little bit yellowish color, and it increased the nutrient because the bran layer and the husk, some bioactive component migrate into the endosperm. So actually, purple rice is much more nutritious than the unpurple rice. What is quick cooking rice? They try to reduce the cooking time from 15 to 25 minutes to 5 minutes, or for brown rice from 45 to 60 minutes to 10 to 15 minutes. They try to create some porous structure to accelerate the cooking, therefore to reduce the cooking time. So they can crack a little bit to create some porous structure, or they can puff to create a little bit of porous structure, or they can try to cook, freeze, thaw, and create some porous structure. Individually cooked frozen rice, usually rice is fully cooked and quick frozen, and then it only takes 2 to 4 minutes heating time for consumption. So it's individually quick frozen type of rice. How about puff rice, which you use in cereal type of product? You can have oven puffing, you can have a gun puffing, you can have extruder puffing, you can have a other type of to create just create a crispy rice. So you need to use, you can use parboil or meal, the raw meal rice to reach certain moisture content and heat up and to create that puffing property. And so this is really widely used in the puff, like Rice Krispie type of application. And this is usually for the whole rice kernel application. But it's also possible, for example, as an extruder, you can have the dough and then come out a shape of a kernel and then puff, or the shape of the cereal and puff to create puff rice. So how about flour? You can also obtain flour from whole rice kernel or broken rice kernel. And depending on different type of way you can produce rice flour. The most important thing is really dry milling or wet milling. In the US, mostly rice flour is produced by dry milling. And but in Asia, mostly it's by wet milling. Wet milling really produce rice flour with much higher quality, because also the smaller particle size, because it has much gentle process. It does not damage starch. However, it does create a little more pollution. It tends to have more processing to produce a final rice flour. You can also divide into long grain rice flour, waxy rice flour, brown rice flour, or pre-gelatinized rice flour. So there are many, many different types of rice flour available for product development application. So you need to understand which one will be more desirable for your application. For example, long grain rice is different from waxy rice flour because of amylose content. And brown rice flour is different from the other because of the presence of bran layer. Pre-gelatinized rice flour, which is already cooked, so it gives you instant viscosity development. So here give you extrusion type of cooking. So you have, for example, here, like here, you can create different type of a shape because starch is being cooked, and then under pressure, it puff, and it can come out any shape of your design based on the die, and different flavor based on how you apply or incorporate during the dough processing condition. So during extrusion, starch is cooked, it's gelatinized and melt, and then some starch is also degraded. And that's why it's very, very important to understand what is the best condition So you will not lose the desired starch property you are looking for in your finished product, because if its extrusion condition is too severe, you may have a lot of starch degradation, which you're going to have really poor physical property of the finished cereal product. So this is what we are talking about. If you you want to cook the starch, but you don't want to go to the degradation, because then you're going to lose a lot of physical strength or desired texture property. So how about syrup? If you see the market, sometimes you're going to see a lot of new product from rice. So you can see here is brown rice syrup. Landable from California, this is also brown rice syrup. And they are trying to use either enzymatic or chemical hydrolysis to produce rice. At the same time, they also bring in some protein into this product because it's brown rice syrup. So it also has high protein content. So in addition to sweetness, it also give you additional health nutritional benefit because the presence of protein and the presence of other minerals and other bioactive components. So if we look at the rice, rice has a brand there, has rice bran oil, has starch, has protein. So rice bran is really high in protein, lipid, fiber, and a lot of mineral. It has oresol. It has been shown to lower cholesterol. It can be difficult to work with because it tends to oxidize pretty rapidly. So bran layer need to be stabilized. It is used a lot in pet food and feed. It's really high value product, high nutrition value. However, it needs to be stabilized really quickly once you remove the bran layer from rice. And because of the lipase, lipoxygenase oxidation. So this is one thing in the US, they usually tend to go through the extrusion process to stabilize bran layer for further processing. Rice bran oil is really high value product from the rice bran. It's really used a lot in Asia, particularly Japan. So in the US, a lot of rice processing company, they specifically extract rice bran oil from stabilized rice bran. And because rice bran oil has been shown to have high antioxidant capacity, and it has high tocopherol, tocotrienol, folic acid, and other functional ingredient. It is still not as popular as other oil because the rice bran oil is still not as high content in rice bran, so it is really highly specialized, really high, like special segment for this product. But it does have the rice industry does have a capacity to produce more rice bran oil if there is a market need. Starch, rice starch is really unique because rice starch is probably the smallest rice, smaller starch granule in all the commercially available starch source. It is bland. It has a different texture. It's really tiny. It gives you really creamy texture. Rice protein also now is very popular because it's gluten-free. It uses a lot for the plant-based protein. However, because the rice is much more expensive than other legume type of protein, so it is probably a little bit more expensive than legume protein. However, rice protein is a good co-product from rice bran. So most of the rice bran protein, rice protein is really from rice bran protein. So if this process can be optimized, there will be more rice protein available to be extracted from rice bran. So rice is used a lot in processed food. Probably you know about breakfast cereal. It also used in snack, in entree, like TV dinner, in soup, in baby food, which is a really important category. If you are not aware, rice is used a lot in beer as an adjunct to provide additional starch source. Also used in pet food, in meat analog, in other dairy product alternative, which they want the dairy-free product, or they want vegan or type of product. So for example, here you can see the breakfast cereal. It could be just puff rice as a whole kernel, or is into shape like Chex Mix here, type in different shape. Snack, this is also very, very popular, not only in the US, probably mostly in Asia. You can see this type of thing, particularly a Japanese snack here. And rice cracker is popular because this is gluten-free. So rice probably is the best source to provide gluten-free type of product to replace wheat flour. This is really, really like recently become very, very popular sticky rice chips. And this is Quaker type of rice cake. We call rice cake here. Packaged rice, you can see here, this is very, very common. You can see it has, probably powder rice or instant rice, or just regular, mostly processed rice, so to make it the cooking faster. And with all the spice mix, you can have jambalaya, you can have all this. With whole packaged rice, you cook and you get the whole meal in one bag. And frozen entree, you can see here, you have, the rice bowl here with brown rice. Oh, here, the rice bowl here. Baked product, because the popularity of a gluten-free diet, you can see here, even though a lot of people really are not allergic to gluten, but they perceive gluten-free diet is good for them for weight loss, for healthy reason, or just a popular trend to have a gluten-free product. Soup is very popular in the US as well. Here you can see chicken with rice, meatball with rice here. Rice really goes well with a lot of dishes. So, and most of the time, this type of, you need to use high amylose rice, so it's not going to become mushy after processing. And most of the time, they use parboiled rice to provide the integrity and good texture after the canning process. Baby food is probably one of the most popular product for rice because it's gluten-free and it's easy to digest. It's really bland and it's easier to prepare for parents. Beer, if you ever been here, you will see this sign. Okay, Budweiser, Bud Light is the biggest beer company in the US. Anheuser-Busch is really, Budweiser, Bud Light is used the most of the rice, is the biggest rice consumer, like company using rice for Arkansas produced rice. Bud Light use rice as adjunct to provide as a sugar source because from starch for fermentation. So you can see up to 40% is really, the sugar is really from rice. Pet food is also an important source of rice because now pet owners want to have a health option for their pets, and rice is, it's not allergic, it's hypoallergenic. So that's why a lot of pet food you can see rice on the label here. And most of the time they use broken. They don't use the whole rice. They use broken and smaller rice grains. And meat analog, you can see here. See here, you can see they use, if you see the ingredient, you can see rice is because they want to have a fully gluten. For example, they want to, as a gluten-free here. So they use starch to bind water in some meat product, and rice protein is used in this product. So this is my last slide. So talk about milk and dairy alternative here. You can have milk, regular milk. You can also have a rice milk here. So here you can see this is just use rice to make milk, and you can have rice milk to make ice cream, and you can have rice to make like a cheese type of product here. So it's getting very, very popular to use rice in a lot of different products. So you can see how rice is being produced and used in so many different sectors. I hope you have a question for me. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting lecture, Dr. Juan. We are very happy to attend your lecture. Right now, we had a time for some questions.
Which rice variety and cooking process are the most nutritious? When you say nutritious, I think you talk about protein content, is it? Yeah, so I think the most nutritious probably would be if you use brown rice, and probably parboiled brown rice will be the good one. So if you use parboiled brown rice, will give you probably the most nutritious product. However, it doesn't mean it can give you the property you want. So that's always a balance between the quality and the property, because once it's used brown rice or use parboiled rice, it doesn't puff. If you want to use in puff application, it doesn't give you a good elasticity. So, and that would be something, you have to consider the balance, how to produce the product, still use the rice you want, but get the property you want for your finished product, So I think it's always challenging to come out something. For example, if you want to use brown rice to produce a Rice Krispie, the puff rice kernel, it may be difficult to produce a large volume as the meal rice if you use brown rice. So how do you overcome that? So how can you do that? And that's always a balance. How can you do that? So it's, just like brown rice, when you cook, it tend to be harder, not as sticky. Some people don't like it, even though it's more nutritious. So how can you process in a way to make it a little bit less chewy, a little bit more stickier? So, sometimes it's always the balance between the quality and the property. Any other question?
Yo tengo una pregunta.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. Jane. Thank you for your lecture. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
My question is, why do you think the viscosity of cooked rice increased over the age?
Oh, so if I understood your question, so you talk about the viscosity of rice after aging?
Yes.
Yeah, usually we attribute the decreased viscosity to protein oxidation during storage. So you can imagine protein is coated outside the starch granule. So when protein becomes oxidized, it has a tighter linkage. So it makes the starch swelling not as freely. It restricts the swelling a little bit. So depending on how much restriction you apply to starch. So at the beginning, if you just a little bit restriction, actually you can make it the viscosity a little bit higher. But however, if the restriction become more and more, and you're going to decrease the viscosity. So the wild rice species, wild rice is really not rice. Wild rice is totally different species. It is more nutritious if you consider the pigment. So just like pigmented rice, they are pigmented rice really, particularly in Asia. People commonly consume the pigment rice, but it has the same issue with brown rice because pigment mostly is in the bran layer. So if you want to have that pigment, you have to just like consume brown rice. So that would be the same thing with wild rice. Wild rice is popular, it's only with certain dish. And it is people kind of associate, that's how you expect with wild rice. So that would be interesting if you can apply those pigmented rice for certain application. People can accept that kind of texture because it's going to be harder, it's going to be fluffier. And sometimes people accept that as a healthier option. They will eat it, but people need to kind of know that's what kind of texture you're going to get. So another question about indigenous rice. I think there are a lot of research really on this topic, particularly probably from Africa, because Africa rice species is totally different from the other part of the world. So they have this type of rice research going on now. It is interesting and important because of climate change. So they want to see if they can identify rice variety which will be more drought resistant or which can tolerate much higher temperature or which can grow under different environment. So I think this is a very, very good area to investigate, to try to identify rice variety which will be much suited for maybe the climate in 5-10 years to come. So I think that would be very interesting to look at those options. Instead of, so that would be one direction. I think some researchers, they are working on right now. Also, for example, try to grow in much lower water requirement or try to grow in much like salty water condition. So those are the area people are looking for. That's why they are looking for some indigenous variety, particularly in Africa. Any other questions?
I had a question, Dr. Wang.
Yes.
The pigment in the pigment varieties is in the external layer of the grain, or is inside of the?
We are working on one purple rice right now. It's mostly in the bran layer. However, the endosperm also has very, very small amount, but we notice it has really interesting property. So it's not just in the bran layer, but majority, no, probably 99% is then brand there. However, the endosperm we still can determine very, very small amount of phenolic compound in endosperm. So it's not just in the brand there, but predominantly is in the brand there.
But do you know if after cooking, those phenolic compounds continue with the antioxidant activity, or is lost after cooking of the rice?
I don't know. I would think some study probably have done that already, so I really don't know how that compare with, if you consume fruit, berry or something, it's not processed. I really don't know that.
What do you think about which kind of cooking of the rice? After cooking, what kind of cooking is to the start digestibility of a starch, is to slowly digestible starch or change to rapidly digestible starch after cooking?
Which cooking will produce most slowly?
I don't know if,
or resistant starch?
Oh, yes, after cooking, because when the is uncooked rice, the highest amount or the highest content is slowly digestible starch. But after cooking, what kind of cooking is to maintain those characteristics of slowly digestible starch in rice?
I think parboiling is the one give you more slowly digestible starch. Parboiling, yeah, among different processes. I think parboiling, or one study show, if you just cook with oil, the way how Indian they cook their dish, and that will produce more slowly digestible because the oil cooking, during that process. So that would be something. But if we're not talking about those, just the type of process we're talking, I think parboiling will be the one give you more slowly because it has the interaction with protein, and it also has the retrogradation. The way how they dry, it allows time for a lot of reassociation. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Is rice oil a better cooking oil? Rice bran oil is really unsaturated. So it's totally different from coconut oil. I don't know what is better. If it's frying, no, I don't think. I think coconut oil is better frying oil. So rice bran oil is really unsaturated. So it's healthy aspect. It's better than coconut oil, but it's not used for frying. Okay. So. So so rice bran oil probably for Japan is probably mostly for just as a cooking, just like as coconut oil, because coconut oil is really unique to certain region. How can the internal structure be related to texture? Okay, so I want to tell you one thing about this. It's really important. So I work with rice a lot in the US. So when we look at the gelatinization temperature, which is the temperature where you need to cook gelatinized starch, the temperature is really determined by amylopectin structure. So that is related to amylopectin structure, and the texture wise is also dictated, by the amylose content, also by amylopectin structure. So for example, waxy rice, like sweet rice or glutinous rice, they are different type of sweet rice. And one is stickier than the other because they have a different amylopectin structure. So yes, amylopectin really dictate how you cook the rice and also the texture. So if you are familiar with sweet rice or glutinous rice, you will know they are different type of sticky rice and they have totally different texture, even though they, there is almost 100%, like 99% amylopectin, and that they have totally different texture. Yes. Do you guys eat sweet rice, the glutinous rice, as a dessert in Mexico?
No, I think so that, but use the quality Morelos in Mexico, the rice. Do you remember 10 years ago when Carolina Chavez was working in your lab?
Yeah.
It's related to structure with the texture of the quality of rice, because in that moment we tried to obtain the origin denomination of Morelos rice here in Mexico. But in the case of some varieties used for too sweet, for to the snack, I don't know. But sweet variety is not common in Mexico until I know. I don't know.
Yeah. So for us in our culture, so usually we have the sticky rice, the glutinous rice or sweet rice, which it's almost 99% amylopectin. There are two different types. One is indica shape, one is japonica shape. So so the one with japonica shape is stickier and is usually used as a dessert. So and then the other one is not sticky, even though it's all the same amylopectin, same amount, but it's not. And usually for us, we use as we cook as a savory. It's not dessert, and that's why usually when you say sweet rice, usually you talk about the japonica type of shape, and that is usually used as a dessert in Asia. So that's why, yes, amylopectin structure is very, very important for how you cook and then the texture. Oops. What does that mean?
Is the rice with sugar and milk. Is a dessert here in Mexico, but the people use in district the different rice type. Is not use a one type of rice used for to that dessert in Mexico.
Yes, you guys probably the rice pudding, is that right?
Yeah.
You guys have rice pudding. So rice pudding is just regular rice.
Yes.
It's not sticky rice. Yeah, I had the rice pudding, so I kind of know. So you just cook rice with milk. And
yes, right.
But that one usually just medium grain, long grain rice would be fine. Yeah. So if you ever had to go to Thailand or go to Asia, you have those sticky like mango rice, that need to be sticky. So that is usually, I don't think you guys have a sticky rice at all. Yeah.
Okay. No more questions. Mario.
Gracias, Arturo. Thank you, Arturo. Dr. Wang, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to, Arturo, we will going to send the certificate of your lecture. Now I show the certificate.
Oh, thank you. I think electronic copy will be fine.
Yes, I'm going to read the certificate.
Okay.
Instituto Politécnico Nacional, Centro de Desarrollo de Productos Bióticos, award the present certificate to Dr. Jane Wang, Department of Food Science, Department University of Arkansas, for his participation as speaker with the lecture intituled Rice Quality and Utilization, present virtually at the seminars of the doctoral program in development of biotic products, Yautepec, Morelos, 25 of April of 2022. Atentamente la técnica al servicio de la patria, doctora Gabriela Trejo Tapia, doctora Perlo Osorio Díaz. I read some mistakes in the certificate. We are to make the corrections.
No
Sorry.
problem. No problem.
And thank you very much for your interesting lecture, Dr. Wang.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's my honor.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Wang. I will send this afternoon the certificate by email.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
And I would like to say again, thank you very much. I appreciate your lecture and your contribution at the graduate students here in our research center. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So see you next time. Maybe see you next time.
Yeah, next time. Right.
Oh, start roundtable next year.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.